how can we, when we're experiencing betrayal triggers, still manage those day-to-day responsibilities and relationships without it kind of blowing up in our kids' faces or with our friends or our community, our jobs? Like, how does a betrayed partner manage those? First, is it possible to manage those in a way that doesn't negatively impact people significantly? And if so, how do we do that?
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely possible. But it's, going through trauma while you're doing life with others
Mm-hmm.
or harder, being a caregiver to others is so hard because it's like you're bleeding out while trying to bandage somebody else up.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I like anger was part of something that I had to work through and is part of my history. And I had suppressed anger as a betrayed spouse. I didn't know I was angry, but it came out sideways with my kids. And so even now when I'm feeling high stress, which is like 24/7 right now, I can feel I can feel myself getting real edgy with my kids. The beautiful thing is I used to live like that all the time. And now I'm able to recognize like, wow, I'm really snappy. I'm really edgy. So having a tag team approach with your spouse, this is where the struggling spouse can really step up. And they're not going through they may have the shame, definitely, but they're not going through that fresh betrayal
Yeah.
trauma. And so a lot of times we're not crazy at the same time with our friends or our spouses. And so if you can see that your betrayed spouse is really having a hard time snapping at the kids, just like staring off while making dinner and it's burning, it would be so great for you to be able to recognize that and step in and say, you know what, why don't you go take a break? Why don't you go get a pedicure? Why don't you go to Target? Why don't you go lay down and let me do this? Like if you do that regularly, that really just shows something.
Yeah.
It shows that you see them, it shows that you care, it shows that you recognize that you've maybe put her in this position to have to deal with these things or do extra homework. And so, and then communication with your kids. I don't know how old they are, but you can have age appropriate communication that, I'm really going through something. It has nothing to do with you. I don't want you to think that when I'm snapping and, I might lose my temper and yell at you, or I'm zoning off, or I'm not as playful as I normally am, that
Yeah.
has anything to do with you. I'm going through something and I'm trying to deal with it. And so I'm apologizing in advance if I'm not completely available, and then do what you can to take the load off you. I know that some betrayed spouses, they don't have means, but take the help from your friends. We in Dr. Barbara Steffen's training, she talks about casserole widow, that when somebody dies or somebody loses their spouse, the church or women will rally around and say, I'm bringing you this casserole, I'm going to help with your kids. But then when we experience betrayal, like maybe we just lost our husband of 30 years because he left us for his girlfriend. I mean, that is just as that's almost harder than death
Yeah.
in some ways. And so, to rally around your friends who are going through betrayal and say, let me bring you some meals because you just discovered a new trigger. I had my group and my friends do that a few times and it was awesome. They're like, let me grab your kids so you can deal with this and
Mm-hmm.
just like not have to be a parent today, or let me bring you ice cream, let me cook your kids dinner. So do that for each other, do that for your spouse, and then take the burden off, take pressure off. If you can't
Yeah.
volunteer somewhere, if you need to hire a housekeeper for a season, um, I guess just clear your plate a little bit so you can give yourself lots of space to just be the
Mm-hmm.
best parent you can be and to be the best betrayed spouse
Yeah.
navigating your recovery and your healing,
Mm-hmm.
without all the other things.
Yeah, it's okay to let this be a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as humans, and maybe particularly as Americans, as Westerners, we're like, we just got to soldier on, just keep doing your best,
Yeah.
keep doing everything, and kind of figure this out on the side. And it's like, there's a piece of this where betrayal trauma and discovery and sexual brokenness in a marriage, like, it's a big deal. And it is okay to take a deep breath and go, for a season, we're going to have to do things differently. And I
Hmm.
remember, Dr. Ted telling my wife and I that of like, this needs to be your priority this year, and you're going to need to do less in other areas. You're going to need to, back out of some commitments. You're going to need to be less involved in certain things so that you have the time and space to walk through this. And so if you realize, man, this is impacting life around me, okay, how can we potentially for a season
Mm-hmm.
do less?
Yeah.
Maybe we have more frozen pizzas for dinner, and that makes you feel like a bad mom or a bad parent that I'm feeding my kids DiGiorno. I was like, well, if it's giving you some freedom
Yeah.
to process emotions, to do your work and not, be losing your temper, they're going to be okay, with some frozen pizzas for a while.
Yeah.
Or if there's less kids sports you do, if you're less involved at church, God's not going to say, I can't believe you only served, 1 hour a week in that season because you were going through betrayal.
Yeah.
Where were you? You're like, no, your health, your relationships, growing through this time, it is the number one priority. Yeah. And so if other things have to kind of get a back burner or a back seat for a little while or for this season, it's okay, because you're just saying this matters. This is a big deal. And back to your illustration, Ashley, if you had a death in the family, it's like our society gives people permission, like, man, take as long as you need, take as much time, like we'll work with you. What if we had that same mindset for betrayal and recovery? Like, this is going to take time, and take what you need. And maybe others won't give us that, but on the inside, we could give ourselves some of that permission, like, this matters and it's going to take some time, and letting it matter will also give us the space to do the work we need to do.
And that's why it's so important to have a professional, a counselor, a therapist, or a group, is because those are people who will remind you of that. Because as you guys are sharing, it's so true what you guys are saying. I also have heard and even personally experienced from the church, like, well, you shouldn't stop serving. This is the time to serve more, lean in more, do all of that. And I think what that is that's crossing a boundary. And if you have a counselor or a therapist, someone who has that professional clinical experience, or a Betrayal and Beyond group, or a betrayal group of some, capacity, those are people who'll be like, hold on a second, like, you cannot do this. You're not up for that. You need to take more space. You need to give yourself more grace. And again, I just feel like without those relationships, it's easy to slip back into, okay, I guess I should share, or I should say yes to these things continually, when ultimately it's just creating more difficulty in your life. So again, the importance of community or professional.
Yeah, and I feel so sad. I mean, I just was working with a woman, and it's like, well, the nearest group is this far away. And Nick, I know you drove a long way for your groups, but the comment, and especially for maybe a mom who has the burden of the house on them, it's like, well, I really can't set that time or distance aside for myself right now. That's not possible. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, no, it's so needed right now. It's the best thing you can do for yourself right now. It's the best gift you can do yourself. And I know it sucks when you're like, okay, if I do this, it does mean my kids are eating DiGiorno, poor DiGiorno. Or
Red Baron, do Red Baron. DiGiorno burns the top of your mouth. Yeah.
Yeah. My kids are eating pizza, or the bathrooms are going to be nasty, and that's triggering to me in another way. And it's like, we're balancing all these things, and it's like, we are going to have to deal. Like right now, I'm dealing with yucky floors, and that's why I'm hiring a housekeeper, because it's not a priority for me right now. I have got my mom living with me who has dementia. And so even what you were saying, Trevor, I had to tell my youth group, like, for the rest of the school year, I cannot help. Like, it is too much. I have work, I have deadlines, I have kids, I'm still a wife, and I have my mom living with me who has dementia. It's just too much. And I battle that shame because I don't think I got the response I really was hoping for that's like supportive, because not everybody has that mindset if you haven't been through it. And so I just have to remind myself, this is what's best for me and my family, and I need to do that, and trust that, like, God will take care of all of this over here. And I can't really care what people think about me right now, because I absolutely need to create margin for my family. And that's a hard place to be, because now you're having to wrestle with these emotions of how your church family or your community or your friend group might see you, because you're having to say no and pull back on things. And so the betrayed spouse is having to deal with shame and maybe isolation or rejection on top of this whole thing they're dealing with in their marriage. And that's, again, why you need a group to support you, because they've been there and done that. And they're going to be the ones to say, no, it doesn't matter if they're mad at you. You can say no to that, and it's okay.